For 7 years, she had hidden her true identity, building a life as a simple healer in a remote mountain village where no one knew who she really was. 7 years since she fled the Alpha King's palace in the dead of night, pregnant with his child he never knew existed. But when he arrived at her door, bleeding from a silver-poisoned wound that only she could heal, she faced an impossible choice. Save the man she once loved and risk everything, or let him die and keep her daughters safe from the world that had nearly destroyed them both. The knock came just after midnight, sharp and desperate against the worn wood of Liralay's cottage door. She jolted awake, her healer's instincts already cataloging the urgency in that sound, not the tentative tap of a villager with a fevered child, but the heavy thud of someone barely maintaining consciousness. "Mama?" A small voice drifted from the loft above. "Someone's hurt." "Stay there, Arya," Liralay commanded softly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders as she approached the door. Her 6-year-old daughter had inherited more than just her healing gift. She could sense pain like a beacon in the darkness. The mountain village of Thornhaven had been their sanctuary for 7 years. 7 years since Liralay had shed her true name, Seraphina, like a snake shedding skin. 7 years since she'd fled the northern capital under cover of darkness, her belly swollen with the child of the Alpha King, who'd claimed her as his mate, only to choose political alliance over their bond. She opened the door expecting to find one of the local miners, perhaps injured in a late-night collapse. Instead, her breath froze in her throat. Alpha King Theron lay crumpled on her doorstep, his massive frame barely fitting across the narrow porch. Even wounded and unconscious, he radiated the raw power that had once made kingdoms kneel. His dark hair, now streaked with premature silver at the temples, was matted with blood. But it was the wound on his shoulder that made her healer's heart stutter. Black veins, spreading like spider webs from a deep puncture, the telltale sign of silver poisoning. "No," she whispered, her hand tightening on the doorframe until her knuckles went white. "Not here. Not now." But even as her mind screamed at her to close the door, to protect the life she'd built, her eyes traced the severity of his condition. The poison had spread far too far for any ordinary healer. The black veins had reached his neck, creeping toward his heart. He had hours at most, maybe less. From behind him, a figure emerged from the shadows, Beta Commander Garrett, his loyal second, supporting another wounded warrior. Both bore similar marks of battle, though neither as severe as their Alpha's condition. "Please," Garrett gasped, not recognizing her beneath the weight of 7 years and common clothes. "Our healer is dead. They say, there's a healer in this village who can work miracles. The Alpha King is dying." Liralay's mind raced. If she saved him, he would know her immediately. The moment her healing magic touched his, the mate bond they'd once shared would flare to life, no matter how deeply she'd buried it. But if she refused, "Bring him inside," she heard herself say, stepping aside. "Quickly, before the poison reaches his heart." Liralay worked through the night, her cottage transformed into a battlefield against death. The Alpha King lay on her treatment table, the same rough-hewn wood where she'd delivered countless village babies and mended broken bones. Now, it bore the weight of the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories. "Hold him steady," she instructed Garrett, who hadn't left his Alpha's side. The Beta's loyalty was admirable, even if misplaced. She remembered Garrett from her time at court, younger then, newly appointed, full of righteous dedication to his king. The silver poisoning was unlike anything she'd seen in her 7 years of village healing. The black veins pulsed with malevolent life, fighting her every attempt at treatment. She'd tried everything wolfsbane tincture to counteract the silver, blessed thistle to purify the blood, even ancient purging remedies her grandmother had taught her. Nothing worked. "Who did this?" she asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral as she ground herbs with practiced efficiency. "Rogues," Garrett spat. "A coordinated attack on the king's hunting party. They knew exactly where we'd be, exactly when we'd be vulnerable." His eyes darkened. "Someone betrayed us." Liralay's hand stilled for just a moment. Political betrayal, the very thing that had driven her from the palace 7 years ago. Theron had chosen to marry Lady Cassandra of the Eastern Pax for alliance, setting aside their mate bond for what he called the greater good. "Mama?" Arya's voice drifted from the loft. He's dying. I can feel it. Garrett's head snapped up. You have a daughter? Pari. Stay upstairs, little one, Lorelei called, then turned back to her work. But her heart raced. Arya had inherited more than healing abilities. She'd inherited her father's distinctive violet-tinged eyes, eyes that marked the royal bloodline. She pressed her hands against Theron's chest, feeling for his heartbeat. It was there, but weak, irregular. The poison had spread further while she'd worked. The black veins now traced up his neck, creeping toward his jaw. There's one more thing I can try, she said quietly, knowing she was sealing her own fate. But you must promise me something first. Anything. Garrett said immediately. Whatever you see, whatever happens in this room, you speak of it to no one. Not even him. When he wakes, the beta hesitated, loyalty warring with desperation. You have my word. Lorelei closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, to the place where her true power lay dormant. Not the herb knowledge she'd learned from her grandmother, but the rare gift that had made her valuable to the Alpha King in the first place. The ability to heal with pure magical energy. A power found in perhaps one wolf every generation. Golden light emanated from her palms, warm and alive. The moment it touched Theron's skin, his body arched off the table. The mate bond, severed but never truly broken, roared to life between them like wildfire. She gasped, nearly pulling away, but forced herself to continue. Through the bond, she could feel everything: his pain, his desperation, and beneath it all, a loneliness that matched her own. 7 years of emptiness, of searching for something he couldn't name. The golden light battled against the black poison, and for a moment, she thought she might fail. Then, slowly, the black veins began to retreat, pulling back from his jaw, his neck, consolidating around the original wound. But healing him meant opening herself to the bond, and with it came the memories she'd buried: his hands in her hair, his voice calling her name. The night he'd told her he had no choice but to take another as his Luna. Remarkable, Garrett breathed, watching the light work. The poison fought back with vicious intent, and Lorelei realized with cold certainty this wasn't ordinary silver. It had been enhanced with dark magic, specifically designed to kill an alpha. The golden light from Lorelei's hands pulsed brighter as she fought against the supernatural poison. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her whole body trembled with the effort of channeling so much power after keeping it dormant for 7 years. What are you? Garrett whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. She couldn't answer, couldn't spare the concentration. The poisoned wound was fighting back with intelligence, as if it knew exactly how to counter her healing gift. This was no random rogue attack. Someone had crafted this poison specifically to kill an Alpha King, someone who knew the ancient ways. Theron's body convulsed on the table, and his eyes snapped open, not the warm brown she remembered, but blazing alpha gold. His wolf was fighting for dominance, trying to heal him from within, but the poison turned his own power against him. Hold him, Lorelei commanded, and Garrett threw his weight across his alpha's legs while she pressed down on his shoulders. But Theron was strong, even dying, and his thrashing threatened to throw them both off. Then, from the loft above, came a small voice singing in the old tongue, a lullaby Lorelei had sung to Arya since birth, not knowing where she'd learned it. The melody seemed to calm Theron's wolf, and his thrashing eased. No, Lorelei breathed, but it was too late. Arya descended the wooden ladder, her small face serene, her violet-tinged eyes glowing with the same golden light that emanated from her mother's hands. She approached the table without fear, placing her tiny hand over her mother's. "Together, Mama," she said simply. "He needs us both." The moment Arya's power joined hers, Lorelei felt the tide turn. The poison, so vicious and cunning against one healer, couldn't withstand two, especially when one carried the Alpha's own bloodline. The black veins began to retreat rapidly, pulling back like shadows before dawn. Garrett stared at the child, and Lorelei saw the exact moment recognition dawned. The eyes, the age, the instinctive way she'd known how to calm the Alpha's wolf. "By the old gods," he whispered. "She's his." "Say nothing," Lorelei warned sharply, even as she maintained the healing flow. You gave your word. The beta's jaw clenched, but he nodded, understanding the implications. The poison made one last violent attempt to spread, surging toward Theron's heart with desperate malevolence. Lirelei pulled Arya back, shielding her with her own body as she poured everything she had into the healing. The golden light blazed so bright it filled the cottage, and she felt something deep within her crack, a wall she'd built around her heart, around the mate bond, around everything she'd once been. Then, suddenly, it was over. The black veins vanished completely, leaving only a clean wound that would heal naturally. Theron's breathing steadied, his heartbeat strong and regular. The Alpha King would live. But the effort had cost Lirelei dearly. She collapsed beside the table, her vision going dark at the edges. The last thing she saw was Arya's concerned face hovering above her, and the last thing she heard was Theron's voice, rough with disuse, speaking a name she hadn't heard in 7 years. Seraphina? When she woke, it was dawn. Pale light filtered through the cottage windows, and every muscle in her body ached as if she'd run 100 miles. She was in her own bed, a cool cloth on her forehead, and Arya curled against her side. Voices drifted from the main room, Garrett's low rumble and another she knew too well, stronger now but still weak. Theron was awake, alert, and from the tone of their conversation, asking questions. The healer collapsed after saving you, my king. She has a gift I've never seen before. Where is she from? How long has she been here? Lirelei forced herself to sit up, knowing she had to face this moment. 7 years of hiding were over. Lirelei stood in the doorway of her own cottage, watching the Alpha King who'd once held her heart. Theron sat at her simple wooden table, his broad shoulders tense, his dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that was achingly familiar. When he turned to look at her, she saw the exact moment recognition fully dawned. Seraphina, he breathed, rising so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. It's really you. That's not my name anymore, she said quietly, pulling her shawl tighter. I'm Lirelei now, the village healer, nothing more. His eyes brown now, not alpha gold, searched her face with desperate intensity. For 7 years I looked for you. 7 years, Sarah Lirelei. Every pack, every territory. You vanished like smoke. That was the point. Garrett stood awkwardly by the door, clearly torn between duty to his alpha and the promise he'd made. His eyes kept drifting to the loft where Arya still slept, the question burning unspoken. Leave us, Theron commanded, without looking at his beta. My king, you're still weak. Go. Garrett bowed and left, but not before shooting Lirelei a meaningful look. He would keep her secret for now, but for how long? The cottage felt impossibly small with just the two of them. Theron took a step toward her, and she immediately stepped back, maintaining the distance between them like a shield. Caster. You let me believe you were dead, he said, his voice raw. The night before my wedding to Cassandra, you disappeared. Your chambers were empty. Your scent trail ended at the river. We searched for bodies for weeks. You made your choice, Lirelei replied, proud of how steady her voice remained. You chose your alliance, your political marriage. I chose freedom. I had no choice. The words exploded from him with such force that something on the shelf rattled. The Eastern Pax would have attacked. Thousands would have died. I thought you understood. I understood perfectly. She cut him off. I understood that our mate bond meant less than politics. That what we had was disposable when something more advantageous came along. He flinched as if she'd struck him. That's not Cassandra died 3 years ago, 4 years after our marriage. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Lirelei felt something cold settle in her stomach. I'm sorry for your loss. It was never a true mating, he said quickly. Political only. She knew it, I knew it. We never. He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Why am I explaining this? You're here. You're alive. That's all that matters. Mama? Both adults turned to see Arya descending the ladder, her small feet bare, her dark hair mussed from sleep. She froze when she saw Theron standing there, her violet-tinged eyes wide with the instinctive recognition all young wolves had for an alpha's presence. Theron went completely still, his gaze locked on the child. Lirelei watched the calculations happen, the age, the eyes, the way Arya's power had resonated so perfectly with his during the healing. "Go back upstairs, sweetheart," Lirelei said quickly. But it was too late. Arya tilted her head, studying Theron with that unnerving directness children possessed. "You feel familiar," she said simply. "Like Mama, but different, stronger." Theron's legs seemed to give out. He sank onto the nearest chair, his eyes never leaving Arya's face. "How old are you, little one?" "6," Arya replied proudly. "Contig, my birthday's next month. I'll be 7 then." Lirelei closed her eyes, knowing the exact calculation he was making. 7 years since she'd fled. 9 months would make the timing perfect. "Sarah," his voice cracked on her old name. "Is she? The Siamaris?" "Arya, go gather eggs from the chickens," Lirelei commanded, her tone brooking no argument. "But Mama, now." The little girl huffed but obeyed, grabbing the basket by the door. The moment she was gone, Theron was on his feet, crossing to Lirelei in 2 strides. "She's mine." Not a question but a statement. Wonder and fury warring in his voice. "You kept my daughter from me." "She's my daughter," Lirelei said firmly, backing away from Theron's advance. "I raised her alone. I protected her, taught her, loved her without any help from you or your crown. You stole her from me." His eyes flashed gold again, his alpha wolf surfacing with rage. "My heir, my blood." "Your what?" Lirelei laughed bitterly. "Your heir? Is that all she would have been to you, another political tool? Another sacrifice for the greater good of the kingdom?" The cottage door burst open. Garrett stood there, breathing hard, his face grim. "My king, we have a problem." Riders approaching from the Valley Royal Guards, but not ours. "They bear the Eastern Pack seal," Theron cursed, under his breath. "Cassandra's brother. He must have heard about the attack." "There's more," Garrett said urgently. "They're asking about a healer. Someone in the village talked about the golden light last night." "They're coming here?" Lirelei's blood ran cold. Lord Aldrich of the Eastern Pax, Cassandra's brother who'd inherited the territory after her death. She'd heard whispers even in this remote village of his ambitions, his belief that he should have been the next Alpha King. "Was he behind the poisoning?" she asked sharply. Theron's jaw clenched. "We have no proof, but the timing of the attack, the specific poison used." He turned to Garrett. "How many riders?" 20. "Armed. They'll be here within the hour." "Mama." Arya ran through the back door, eggs forgotten. "There are wolves in the forest, lots of them. They feel wrong." Lirelei's heart hammered. If Aldrich discovered Arya's existence, if he realized Theron had a true-born heir while his sister had died childless. "You have to leave," she said to Theron. "Now. Both of you. I'm not leaving you here." "This is my home," she snapped. "My life. You can't just appear and—" "They'll kill you," Garrett interrupted bluntly. "If Lord Aldrich suspects you're important to the king, if he discovers the child." Enter. Through the window, Lirelei could see dust rising from the valley road. The riders were moving fast. "The healing last night," Theron said quietly. "It reopened our bond. Even severed, even after all these years, they'll be able to sense it on both of us. They'll know what you are to me." "What I was?" she corrected, but her protest felt hollow. She could feel it too. The gossamer thread between them, stronger now than it had been even before she'd fled. The healing had indeed changed something fundamental. "Please," Theron said, and the mighty Alpha King never begged, but here he was. "Come with me, both of you, at least until I can deal with Aldrich." "And then what? You'll let us return to our quiet life?" Lirelei knew the answer, even as she asked. Arya pressed against her mother's side, her small body trembling. "Mama, the wrong-feeling wolves are getting closer." Through the trees, Lirelei caught a glimpse of silver armor, the Eastern Pack's royal guard, moving to surround the cottage. They were out of time. "There's an old hunting path through the northern woods," she said quickly. "It leads to the mountain caves. We can—" The front door exploded inward. Lord Aldrich himself stood there, tall and lean where Theron was broad, with cold gray eyes that held none of his sister's warmth. Behind him, a dozen guards poured in. "Your Majesty," Aldrich said with a mocking bow. How fortunate to find you recovered. We heard you were dying from a mysterious poison. As you can see, I'm quite well, Theron replied, shifting subtly to block the view of Lirelei and Arya. Yes, miraculously so. Aldrich's gaze moved past him, landing on Lirelei. His nostrils flared slightly, scenting the air. And this must be the famous healer, the one who can work miracles with golden light. His eyes dropped to Arya, who pressed closer to her mother. And who is this little one? My daughter, Lirelei said quickly. No one of importance. No? Aldrich stepped closer, and Theron growled low in warning. Then why does she smell like... His eyes widened, darting between Arya, Lirelei, and Theron. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. Oh, this is perfect. The journey to the northern capital took 3 days, and each one was agony for Lirelei. Lord Aldrich had insisted with 20 armed guards to ensure compliance that both she and Arya accompany them for the child's protection. The threat was clear. Come willingly, or watch your daughter taken by force. Theron rode ahead with his own guard, forbidden by Aldrich from traveling with them. Protocol, Aldrich had said with that cold smile. The king must be properly guarded, and potential threats must be contained separately. Lirelei was a prisoner in all but name, riding in a closed carriage with Arya, who hadn't spoken since they'd left Thornhaven. The little girl sat curled against the window, her violet-tinged eyes tracking the wolves that ran alongside their carriage. Aldrich's wolves, whose presence felt wrong in ways Lirelei couldn't explain. On the second night, the pain started. It began as a dull ache in her chest, spreading like fire through her veins. Lirelei bit her lip to keep from crying out, not wanting to alarm Arya or give Aldrich any more ammunition. But this was different from any illness she'd known. It felt like something inside her was tearing apart. Mama? Arya whispered in the darkness of their guarded tent. Your light is fighting something. Through her pain-hazed vision, Lirelei could see it golden light flickering under her skin, pulsing erratically like a heartbeat out of rhythm. The healing of Theron, the reopening of their bond, the stress of captivity, something had triggered a reaction she couldn't control. By the third morning, she could barely stand. The healer seems unwell, Aldrich observed with false concern, as guards lifted her into the carriage. Perhaps the strain of such powerful magic has consequences. Power? Through her fever, Lirelei heard Theron's roar of rage from somewhere ahead, heard the sounds of a scuffle before his beta calmed him. The bond between them pulsed with his fury and fear, making her condition worse. When the spires of the northern capital finally came into view, Lirelei was barely conscious. She felt them carry her somewhere cold stone walls, iron bars. A cell, she realized dimly. They'd put her in a cell. Mama! Arya's voice, terrified and distant. The child will be housed appropriately. Aldrich's voice floated through her delirium. After all, she's royal blood. She deserves better than a prison cell. No, Lirelei tried to say, but darkness claimed her. She dreamed of wolves and golden light, of Theron's voice calling her name, of Arya singing that ancient lullaby. But underneath it all was something else. A presence, ancient and powerful, trying to speak to her. You are more than you know, the voice whispered. The healing gift was just the beginning. But you must choose, embrace what you truly are, or let it consume you. When she woke, she was no longer in a cell but in a luxurious chamber she recognized with sinking dread the Luna's suite in the royal palace. The same rooms she'd fled 7 years ago. You're awake. Theron sat beside the bed, his face haggard with exhaustion. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Arya. Safe. Aldrich has her in the guest wing, under protection. His jaw clenched. I can't move against him without proof he was behind the poisoning. And now he knows about her, about what she is. Lirelei struggled to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through her chest. The golden light under her skin flickered wildly. The palace healers don't know what's wrong with you, Theron said quietly. But I think I do. The bond when you healed me, you took some of the poison into yourself. It's reacting with your power, changing you. Changing me into what? Power. Before he could answer, the door opened. Lord Aldrich entered with several council members, their faces grave. Quote, "The council has reached a decision," Aldrich announced with barely concealed satisfaction. Given the questionable circumstances of the child's birth and the mother's unusual abilities, a trial is required. It, higher, Sayomares. A trial? Theron rose, power radiating from him. On what grounds? Witchcraft, Aldrich said simply, and treason, for hiding the king's heir. He smiled coldly. The penalty for either is death. The trial was set for the full moon. 3 days hence. Lirelei stood before the assembled council, her wrists bound with silver chains that burned against her skin, a precaution against her unnatural abilities. The great hall was packed with representatives from every pack in the kingdom, all come to witness the spectacle. Lord Aldrich stood as chief prosecutor, his gray eyes gleaming with triumph. He'd spent the days since their arrival building his case, gathering witnesses from Thornhaven who spoke of mysterious healings, of golden light and impossible recoveries. "The accused," Aldrich began, his voice carrying across the hall, "stands before you guilty of the highest crimes against nature and crown. She possesses abilities that defy wolf law magic, that belongs to neither wolf nor human, but something altogether more dangerous." Theron sat on his throne, forced by protocol to remain silent during the proceedings. But Lirelei could feel his rage through their bond, could see his hands gripping the throne, arms so tightly the wood creaked. "Furthermore," Aldrich continued, "she committed treason by hiding the king's heir for 7 years, denying the crown its rightful successor, denying the kingdom the stability of a known heir." "I protected my daughter," Lirelei said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The mysterious illness still plagued her, golden light flickering unpredictably beneath her skin. "Your daughter," Aldrich's laugh was cold. "The child belongs to the crown, to the kingdom. You had no right." "I had every right." Lirelei lifted her chin. "The king chose another as his Luna. He severed our bond for a political alliance. I was nothing more than a discarded mistress carrying an inconvenient child." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Many hadn't known the true nature of her relationship with Theron before his marriage to Cassandra. "Yet you survived the severing," Aldrich said, moving closer. "Another impossibility. When a true mate bond is forcibly broken, both parties typically die or go mad, unless," he paused dramatically, "unless you used your unnatural magic to preserve yourself." "I survived because I had something to live for," Lirelei replied. "My daughter." "Ah yes, the child," Aldrich gestured, and guards brought Arya forward. The little girl looked so small between the armored wolves, but her violet eyes blazed with defiance. She'd inherited her father's courage along with his eyes. "Tell us, little one," Aldrich said with false gentleness. "What did your mother teach you about your gifts?" "To hide them," Arya said clearly. "To never let anyone see." "And why would that be? Unless they were something evil." Arya's jaw set stubbornly. "Because people like you would hurt us for being different." A murmur ran through the crowd at the child's boldness. Theron half rose from his throne before Garrett's hand on his shoulder reminded him of protocol. "The child has power too," Aldrich announced. "I've had healers examine her. Her abilities are even stronger than her mother's, a corruption of the royal bloodline that cannot be allowed to spread." "You examined my daughter without consent?" Lirelei strained against her chains, and the golden light under her skin pulsed brighter. "I examined a potential threat to the kingdom." Aldrich turned to address the council, propose. Both mother and child be bound permanently with silver, their powers sealed, and— "Enough." Theron's voice cracked like thunder through the hall. "Your Majesty," Aldrich said smoothly. "Protocol dictates." "Protocol be damned." Theron rose from his throne, his alpha power flooding the room. Weaker wolves dropped to their knees. "You orchestrated this entire farce." "That's a serious accusation." "Is it?" Theron descended from the dais. "The poisoned blade that nearly killed me, it required knowledge of ancient alchemy, access to pure silver, and intimate details of my hunting schedule. All things you had access to through your late sister." Aldrich's composure cracked slightly. "You have no proof. I have this." Garrett stepped forward, producing a vial of black liquid. "The same poison used on the king," found hidden in Lord Aldrich's personal chambers. The hall erupted in chaos. Aldrich's guards moved to protect him, while Theron surrounded Lirelei and Arya protectively. Silence! Theron's alpha command rippled through the room. Everyone froze. Lord Aldrich of the Eastern Pax, you are accused of attempted regicide. How do you answer? Aldrich straightened, his cold smile returning. I answer with challenge. Single combat, as is my right under ancient law. If I win, the woman and child are mine to deal with as I see fit. Lirelei's heart sank. Theron was still weak from the poisoning, still recovering, and Aldrich was known as one of the deadliest fighters in the territories. Accepted, Theron said without hesitation. The combat circle was drawn in the ancient way, silver dust mixed with wolfsbane, creating a boundary neither combatant could cross until one yielded or died. The entire court gathered in the castle's great courtyard, torches blazing against the darkening sky as the full moon rose overhead. Theron stood at one edge of the circle, having stripped to simple pants, his chest bare despite the wound still healing from the poisoning. Aldrich faced him, similarly dressed, lean and predatory, where Theron was powerful and commanding. You're still weak, Aldrich taunted, beginning to circle. The poison did its work well, even if that witch managed to save you. Lirelei stood with Arya at the crowd's edge, still bound in silver chains. Every instinct screamed at her to help, to heal, but the silver prevented her from accessing her gift. Beside her, Arya trembled, sensing the violence about to unfold. When I win, Aldrich continued, I'll take your kingdom, execute your witch, and raise your bastard as my own. She'll make a fine political pawn once her powers are properly bound. Theron's response was a growl that seemed to come from the earth itself. The first clash was brutal. Both men shifted mid-leap, fur exploding from skin as wolf met wolf in a tangle of fangs and claws. Theron's wolf was larger, pitch black with eyes of burning gold, but his movements were sluggish, still affected by the poison's lingering effects. Aldrich's gray wolf was swift, dancing around Theron's attacks, striking and retreating before retaliation could come. Blood began to stain the silver circle, most of it Theron's. He's going to lose, someone whispered nearby, and Lirelei's heart clenched. But as she watched, she noticed something else. Each time Aldrich struck, Theron seemed to catalog the move, learning his opponent's patterns. The Alpha King was deliberately taking damage to study his enemy. Then Aldrich made a mistake. Confident in his advantage, he went for a killing blow to Theron's throat. But Theron had been waiting. He twisted at the last second, jaws clamping down on Aldrich's shoulder, using the smaller wolf's momentum to flip him. The crowd gasped as Aldrich hit the ground hard, Theron's massive form pinning him. For a moment, it seemed over. But Aldrich had one more secret. As he shifted back to human form, he pulled a hidden blade from his boot silver, coated in the same poison that had nearly killed Theron before. He drove it deep into Theron's side. No! The scream tore from Lirelei's throat as Theron collapsed, his wolf form flickering. And now it ends, Aldrich said, standing over the fallen king. But before you die, you should know the truth. He raised his voice for all to hear. Your precious healer isn't just a witch, she's the last of the moon-blessed line, the ancient enemies of our kind. Shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. The moon-blessed healers of legendary power, who had once stood against the first werewolves, before a treaty had ended the bloodshed centuries ago. They were supposed to be extinct. Her grandmother fled here, hiding among humans, Aldrich continued, diluting the bloodline, but it bred true in her. And in the child, he laughed coldly, you mated with our ancestral enemy, Theron. Your daughter is an abomination. Lirelei felt the crowd's mood shift, fear and suspicion replacing sympathy. Even Garrett looked shaken, Power's story. But Theron, bleeding and poisoned, forced himself to his knees. You're wrong, he gasped. The Moonblessed weren't our enemies, they were our balance. Wolf and healer, predator and protector. The treaty didn't end a war, it ended a partnership that made both sides weaker. Lies, Aldrich snarled, raising the poisoned blade again. That's when Arya broke free from her guard's grip. The 6-year-old girl ran into the circle, the silver boundary that should have stopped her parting like water. She threw herself between Aldrich and her father, her small arms spread wide. "Stop hurting him," she commanded, and power rang in her young voice. Not the alpha command of a wolf, but something older, deeper. The moon seemed to pulse overhead, and suddenly Lirelei understood. The silver chains binding her didn't just burn, they were preventing her from becoming what she truly was. "Arya, no," she called, but her daughter's power was already manifesting. Golden light, brighter than anything Lirelei had ever produced, blazed from the child's small form. "Impossible," Aldrich breathed, stumbling backward. "She's both wolf and moon-blessed. She shouldn't exist." "She's the bridge?" Theron said, understanding dawning in his eyes as he looked at his daughter with wonder. "The healing of old wounds between our peoples," Theron said. The golden light emanating from Arya grew stronger, pushing Aldrich back toward the circle's edge. But Lirelei could see the cost. Her daughter's small body wasn't meant to channel such power. Arya's nose began to bleed, her legs shaking with effort. "Stop." Lirelei fought against her silver chains, feeling them cut deeper into her wrists. "Arya, you have to stop." "Can't," Arya gasped. "He'll hurt Papa." That single word, Papa, spoken for the first time, nearly broke Theron's composure, even as he bled from Aldrich's poisoned blade. Aldrich saw his opportunity. As Arya's power flickered from exhaustion, he lunged not for Theron, but for the child herself. His claws extended, aimed for her throat. The world seemed to slow. Lirelei felt something deep within her snap, not breaking, but breaking free. The silver chains holding her shattered like ice, and she moved faster than thought, faster than any human or wolf should be able to move. She caught Aldrich's wrist inches from Arya's throat, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of centuries. "You will not touch her." Power flooded through her, not just the healing light she'd always known, but something far more ancient. The truth of her heritage, suppressed for generations, finally awakened. She was moon-blessed, yes, but not just any healer. She was the direct descendant of the first moon-blessed queen, the one who had made the original treaty with the wolves. Aldrich tried to pull away, but her grip was iron. Where her fingers touched his skin, silver light spread like frost, and he screamed. "The moon-blessed were never weak," Lirelei said, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. "We chose restraint, we chose peace. Threaten our children, and you'll remember why your ancestors feared us." She released Aldrich, and he crumpled to the ground, the silver light having burned through his corruption. He was still alive, but barely. "Mama," Arya whispered, swaying on her feet. "You're glowing." Lirelei looked down and saw her daughter was right. Her entire body emanated a soft silver light, the opposite of her golden healing glow. This was the power of judgment, of protection, of ancient authority. "The old laws," someone in the crowd whispered. "If she's truly moon-blessed royalty, then she has equal claim to judgment in this trial." Elder Fennec, the oldest council member, stepped forward, quote, "The treaty states that in matters involving both our kinds, both authorities must agree." Theron had managed to stand, one hand pressed to his poisoned wound. His eyes never left Lirelei's face, and she saw no fear there, only awe, and something deeper. "Lord Aldrich confessed to attempted regicide," Lirelei said, her voice carrying new authority. "He poisoned the Alpha King and would have murdered a child. By the old laws, his life is forfeit. However," she continued, looking at the assembled crowd, "I propose something different. Aldrich represents the fear and hatred that have festered between our peoples since the treaty separated us. Killing him solves nothing." She knelt beside Aldrich's writhing form and placed her hands on his chest. But instead of the golden healing light, silver fire poured from her palms. Aldrich screamed as it burned through him, not destroying, but purifying. "I take from you the corruption of hatred," she said formally, "the poisoned thoughts that led you to these acts. You will live, but you will remember what you've done with clear eyes and bear that burden forever." When she finished, Aldrich lay gasping but changed. Power. His eyes, when they opened, were clear of malice for the first time and filled with horror at his own actions. "The Eastern Pax will need new leadership," Lirelei said, standing. "Someone who understands the value of unity over division." You're not just deciding his fate, Elder Fennec said slowly. You're claiming your ancient right equal rule with the Alpha King. The courtyard fell silent. Everyone looked between Lirelei and Theron, understanding the implications. The choice is yours, Fennec said to Lirelei. Accept your heritage and stand as moon-blessed queen alongside the Alpha King, or reject it and return to your simple life, if such a thing is even possible now. Siomaris? Lirelei looked at Arya, exhausted but proud, then at Theron, poisoned and bleeding but still standing strong. I fled 7 years ago because I had no place here, she said quietly. A discarded mate, a secret mistress. I won't accept that again. Theron stepped forward, dropping to one knee, despite his injuries. Then accept what you should have been from the beginning. My equal. My partner. My true Luna. Not through mating alone, but through the ancient balance our kinds were meant to maintain. Pretty words, Lirelei said, though her heart raced. But you chose politics over love once before. I chose fear over faith, Theron corrected. I feared war, feared loss, feared being the king who broke centuries of tradition, said our daughter. His voice caught on the word. She's proof that tradition was wrong. Wolf and Moonblessed together don't create weakness. They create something stronger than either alone. Lirelei stood frozen in the courtyard, silver light still emanating from her skin, the weight of centuries pressing down upon her shoulders. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting for her answer to Theron's proposal. But before she could speak, her knees buckled. The silver light flickered and went out like a snuffed candle. She felt herself falling, heard Arya scream, "Mama!" Felt strong arms catch her before she hit the ground. Theron's arms. Despite his own injuries. What's happening? He demanded, looking at Elder Fennec. The old wolf's face was grave. The awakening of such power after generations of suppression. There's always a price. Lirelei could feel it now. The terrible cost of wielding her ancestral power. It was consuming her from within, her body unable to contain what had been released. She'd saved them all, but at the cost of her own life. No, Theron growled, gathering her closer. There has to be something. There is, Fennec said quietly, but you won't like it. Through her fading vision, Lirelei saw them carrying her to the castle's ancient chamber, the one where the original treaty had been signed. Symbols she'd never seen but somehow recognized covered the walls, the combined history of Wolf and Moonblessed. The first Moonblessed queen faced the same choice, Fennec explained as they laid her on the stone altar. Power too great for a mortal form to contain. She had to choose die human or become something more. More, Theron demanded. The ritual of joining, Fennec said. Wolf and Moonblessed united, not just in mating but in essence. She would become both, fully. But it requires a willing wolf to share the burden, Garrett finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. To split their own essence and merge it with hers. The wolf usually doesn't survive the process. I'll do it, Theron said immediately. You can't, Garrett protested. You're already weakened from the poison. The kingdom needs unity? Theron interrupted. And I need her. He looked down at Lirelei's pale face. I failed her once. I won't fail her again. It might not work, Fennec warned. You're both already damaged you from poison. Her from power. The ritual could kill you both. Then our daughter becomes queen, Theron said simply. She's already shown she's both wolf and moonblessed. She's what we were meant to become. No, Lirelei whispered, forcing her eyes open. Won't let you die for me. Die for you? Theron laughed bitterly. Sarah, I've been dying without you for 7 years. This is living. This is choosing us over fear. Papa, don't leave me, Arya sobbed, clinging to both her parents. Never, Theron promised, kissing his daughter's forehead. No matter what happens, we'll never truly leave you. The moon reached its zenith overhead, shining through the chamber's crystal dome. The symbols on the walls began to glow half silver, half gold. It must be now, Fennec said urgently. The moon's power is strongest. Theron lay beside Lirelei on the altar, taking her hand in his. Together? Together, she whispered, though tears streamed down her face. Fennec began the ancient chant. words in a language that predated both wolf and human. The symbols on the walls blazed brighter, power filling the chamber like a living thing. Lirelei felt Theron's essence flowing into her through their joined hands, wild and free, the strength of the wolf, the power of the alpha. At the same time, her own power flowed into him, healing and light, judgment and mercy. The pain was excruciating, like being torn apart and remade at the most fundamental level. She heard Theron roar in agony, felt his hand crushing hers, heard Arya sobbing somewhere beyond the circle of power. Then, suddenly, silence. Lirelei opened her eyes to find herself standing in a place that wasn't quite real. A moonlit forest that existed between dream and waking. Theron stood beside her, but he looked different. His eyes held flecks of silver among the gold, and when he moved, she could see the faint shimmer of moonlight beneath his skin. "We're dying," he said quietly. "I know. I'm not sorry." "Neither am I." They stood together, watching as their forms began to fade at the edges, becoming translucent like morning mist. "At least Arya will be safe," Lirelei said. "The council will protect her." "She'll be magnificent," Theron agreed. "Both of our strengths, none of our weaknesses." As the final darkness approached, Lirelei heard something, a voice, ancient and amused. "Did you think it would be that easy? The first queen didn't die, children. She became eternal, as will you." Light exploded through the forest, and Lirelei gasped as she felt herself being pulled back, reformed, renewed, but different. Fundamentally, irrevocably different. Lirelei's eyes snapped open to find herself still on the altar, but everything had changed. Her vision was sharper, picking up details no human eyes could see. The individual dust motes dancing in the moonbeams, the pulse of blood in every person present, the threads of power connecting all living things. Beside her, Theron stirred, and when their eyes met, she gasped. His were no longer just gold but threaded with silver, mirrors to her own silver-shot golden gaze. "Impossible," Elder Fennec breathed. They both survived. But it was more than survival. Lirelei could feel it. Theron's wolf lived within her now, not as a separate entity, but as part of her very being. And in him, her moon-blessed power had taken root, tempering his raw strength with healing light. "Mama? Papa?" Arya's voice was small, frightened. Lirelei sat up, marveling at how easy the movement was. The exhaustion, the pain, all gone. She felt stronger than she ever had, yet also more at peace. Powers. The war between her two natures had ended because they were no longer separate. "We're here, little one," she said, holding out her arms. Arya flew into their embrace, and the moment the three of them connected, power rippled outward. The watching crowd gasped as every wolf present partially shifted, not into full wolf form, but into something between. And more shocking, several humans among the servants began to glow with faint healing light. "The balance," Fennec whispered in awe. "They've restored the balance. The joining wasn't just between them, it's awakening the old blood in others." Theron stood, lifting Arya with one arm, while helping Lirelei to her feet with the other. When he spoke, his voice carried both the Alpha's command and the moon-blessed authority. "The age of separation ends tonight," he declared. "For too long, our kinds have lived apart, fearing what we could become together. But look," he gestured to their daughter, who glowed with both silver and gold light. "This is our future, not wolf or moon-blessed, but both. United." Lord Aldrich, still kneeling where Lirelei's power had purified him, spoke up. "The other packs won't accept this easily, blasphemy. There will be those who see it as blasphemy. Then they'll face us," Lirelei said, her voice carrying new steel. "Together." She felt the truth of it through the bond she now shared with Theron, not the incomplete mate bond of before, but something deeper. They were literally two halves of a greater whole now, able to sense each other's thoughts and feelings while maintaining their individual selves. "Can you hear me?" Theron's voice echoed in her mind. "Always," she responded, marveling at the intimacy of it. "The Eastern Pacts," Aldrich continued, his voice rough with shame. "I offer them to you freely. Let them be the first territory to embrace this new unity." "No," Lirelei said, surprising everyone. You'll keep the eastern packs, Lord Aldrich, but you'll rule them differently. You've felt the corruption of hatred burned away, you know its cost now. Who better to teach others the price of prejudice? Aldrich's eyes widened with surprise and something like gratitude. There's more, Elder Fennec said, studying them with ancient eyes. The ritual you survived, it's created something unprecedented. You're not just wolf and moon blessed, you're the first of a new kind entirely. Your children, he paused meaningfully, all your children will carry both bloodlines equally. Lyrelay felt heat rise in her cheeks as the implication sank in. More children. The thought should have terrified her, but through their bond, she felt Theron's joy at the possibility, tempered with patience. They had time now, all the time they needed. The coronation, Garrett said, ever practical. If we're to announce a moon-blessed queen alongside the Alpha King, it should be done properly, with all the packs present. 3 days, Theron decided. Send riders to every territory. Let them come and see what we've become. Let them choose, embrace the new age or cling to the old. As the crowd dispersed to prepare, Lyrelay found herself alone with Theron and Arya for the first time in 7 years. They stood in the moonlit courtyard where so much had changed, and she felt suddenly shy. I'm sorry, Theron said quietly, for choosing fear over love, for letting you leave, for taking 7 years to become the man you deserved. I'm sorry too, Lyrelay replied. For running, for hiding our daughter, for not fighting for us. Mama and Papa are silly, Arya announced with childhood wisdom. You both did what you thought was right, but now you can do better. Theron laughed, the sound rich and warm. She's definitely your daughter. Our daughter, Lyrelay corrected, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. As they walked back to the castle together, Lyrelay noticed something strange. Every wolf they passed bore a faint mark, a silver crescent amid their fur. And every human servant had the slightest golden glow to their skin. It's spreading, she murmured. The awakening, Theron confirmed. Our joining has triggered something. The old bloodlines are remembering themselves. They paused at the entrance to the royal quarters, and Theron suddenly seemed uncertain. Your old rooms are gone, I couldn't bear them after you left. But the Luna's suite, Cassandra never used it. It's been waiting. For? Lyrelay asked, though she knew the answer. For you, always for you. The coronation day dawned clear and bright, with representatives from every pack, and even some human settlements gathering in the great courtyard. The same space where Lyrelay had almost lost everything had been transformed with silver and gold banners, symbols of unity between wolf and moon-blessed. Lyrelay stood before an elaborate mirror in the Luna's suite, barely recognizing herself. The gown was neither fully wolf tradition nor moon-blessed custom, but something entirely new, midnight blue fabric that seemed to hold moonlight within its weave. Embroidered with both the running wolf of Theron's house and the healing moon of her ancestors. You look pretty, Mama, Arya said from her perch on the bed, wearing her own smaller version of the gown. Like a real queen. I don't feel like one, Lyrelay admitted, adjusting the circlet that held both moonstone and wolf's iron. A knock at the door interrupted her doubts. Morag entered, the old healer from Thornhaven whom Theron had sent for specifically. Child, Morag said warmly, embracing her. Or should I say, Your Majesty? Always Lyrelay to you, she replied, grateful for the familiar face. Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it. The whole village is here. They're all proud of their healer who became a queen. Morag studied her with knowing eyes. But you're nervous. Terrified, Lyrelay admitted. 7 years ago, I ran from this life. Now I'm not just accepting it but changing it fundamentally. What if they reject us? What if, Potter? What if you succeed? Morag interrupted gently. What if this is exactly what both our peoples need? Through the bond, Lyrelay felt Theron's presence calm, steady, assured. His confidence in them flowed through her, settling her nerves. Ready? His mental voice asked. Together? She responded. Always. The ceremony itself was unlike any coronation before. Instead of Theron crowning her as his Luna, they stood as equals, while Elder Fennec and Morag, representing both traditions, performed the ritual together. For too long, Fennec addressed the crowd, Our kinds have lived in separation, fearing what unity might bring. Today, we heal that ancient wound. Some in the crowd murmured uneasily, but Lirale noticed more nodding in agreement. The changes had already begun. Wolves discovering healing abilities, humans finding their inner strength. The old bloodlines were awakening everywhere. There are those who would resist, a voice called from the crowd. Lord Marcus of the Southern Pack stepped forward, his scarred face skeptical. The traditions exist for a reason. Mixing our bloodlines could weaken both. Or strengthen them, Lirale said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. Lord Marcus, your youngest son was born unable to shift, wasn't he? A weakness that made him an outcast among wolves. Marcus stiffened but nodded. Bring him forward. A young boy, perhaps 10, was pushed through the crowd. He walked with his head down, shoulders hunched, a wolf pup who couldn't become a wolf. Lirale knelt before him, ignoring her elaborate gown. What's your name? Colin, your majesty, he whispered. Colin, would you like to be whole? The boy's eyes widened with desperate hope. But I'm broken, the healers said. The healers were working with incomplete knowledge. She took his small hands in hers. You're not broken, you're waiting. She let her power flow, not the golden healing light or the silver judgment, but both combined. The boy gasped as the energy entered him, awakening something that had always been there but dormant. Now she said gently. Try again. Colin closed his eyes, and for a moment nothing happened. Then his form shimmered, and where a boy had stood, a young wolf appeared, but not just any wolf. His fur held threads of silver among the brown, and when he lifted his head to howl, the sound carried a harmonic note that made everyone shiver. He's both, Marcus breathed, falling to his knees. My son is both wolf and moon-blessed, as are many, Theron said. The bloodlines were never meant to be pure. They were meant to grow, to adapt, to become more than their origins. The crowd erupted in discussion, but it was excitement now, rather than fear. Parents brought forward children who'd been deemed weak or strange, and in each, Lirale and Theron found traces of the combined heritage. This will take time. Lirale addressed them all. Generations, perhaps. But today we begin the work of reuniting what was wrongly separated. As the ceremony concluded and the celebrations began, Lirale found herself standing with Theron and Arya on a balcony overlooking the courtyard. Below, wolves and humans mingled freely, children played without fear, and the air itself seemed lighter. No more running, Theron said, pulling her close. No more choosing duty over love, she replied. No more secrets, Arya added, wedging herself between them with a grin. As the sun set and the moon rose, Lirale felt the rightness of this moment settle into her bones. She had run for 7 years, hidden for 7 years, but all of it had led here to a union that would reshape their world. I love you, Theron said simply. Both of you, all of us. And I love you, Lirale replied, meaning it fully for the first time in 7 years. Wolf and man, king and father, all of you. In the courtyard below, a young wolf howled the same hybrid sound Colin had made, and was answered by dozens more. The new age had begun. 1 year later, Lirale stood in the healer's hall she'd established in the castle, watching as students both wolf and human practiced combining their gifts. The integration hadn't been without challenges, but progress was undeniable. Mama, watch this, Arya called, demonstrating a healing technique that merged both traditions seamlessly. At 7 years old, she was already more powerful than most adult healers, but more importantly, she was kind, using her gifts to help rather than harm. Excellent, little moon, Theron said from the doorway, using his pet name for their daughter. He crossed to Lirale, his hand settling naturally on her expanded waist, where their second child grew another bridge between worlds, another hope for the future. Any word from the Western Territories? She asked. They've agreed to the integration. Apparently, several of their young have already manifested combined abilities. He smiled. The world is changing, just as we hoped. As we dreamed, she corrected, leaning into his warmth. Lord Aldrich appeared in the doorway, much changed from the bitter man he'd been. Your Majesties, the delegation from the far northern clans has arrived. They're requesting an audience about establishing their own healer schools. We'll see them shortly, Theron replied, but his attention was on his family. As Lirelei watched her daughter teach, felt her mate's presence beside her and their child growing within, she marveled at the journey that had brought them here. 7 years of exile had become the foundation for a revolution, not of war, but of unity. The healer queen and the alpha king, bound not by tradition but by choice, not by duty but by love. And in their union, a new world was being born. The age of separation had ended, the age of unity had begun. And somewhere in the village of Thornhaven, stories were already being told of the healer who had fled a king only to return and remake the world. But those were just stories. The truth Lirelei knew was far more complex and infinitely more beautiful, a truth written in silver and gold, in wolf and moon, in the bridge between two worlds that should never have been apart. She was home. They all were. Finally.